Yo, what is up, you absolute legends in the making? Welcome back to Sober Psychology. This is the podcast where we don't just whisper sweet nothings about your mental health. We grab it by the you-know-whats, squeeze out the truth, and slap them across your face with a side of dark humor. That's the best I got for you right now, I'm sorry. I'm Michael, your host, a psychologist in training, a sober dad, and a guy who's seen enough therapy sessions to know that the real crisis isn't just in the bottle, it's in the mirror, staring back at men who've been told to shrink themselves into oblivion. Today we're tackling the masculinity issue, how politics, feminism, society, and even modern Christianity have castrated traditional manhood in recent history, and why we need to revive it like Frankenstein's monster before our families and society crumble into a pile of emasculated dust. Look, if you're a dude listening and feeling like society's turned you into a walking apology for existing, or a woman wondering why the men around you seem lost in a fog of confusion, this episode's gonna hit like a freight train. We're talking suppression through woke politics, feminist agendas, societal norms, and misinterpreted Bible verses. The dark comedy of men being told to man up while being kicked in the nuts, and the hard science showing why healthy masculinity is the glue holding families and civilizations together. By the end, you'll have the tools to reclaim that fire without turning into a caveman asshole. Expect raw rants, psychological studies that'll blow your mind, by the way. These are seriously some ridiculous studies that I dove into. And truths so hard that they're gonna bruise your ego, because pretending that masculinity's toxic is like calling fire dangerous while you're freezing to death. I guess that makes sense, right? Anyways, let's light this up. Welcome to the show where we break down the mental health stigma, navigate sobriety with humor, and prove that it's okay to laugh while you heal. Let's get real, let's get honest, and maybe a little weird. Growth is messy, but you don't have to do it alone. This is Sober Psychology. Welcome back, you beautiful human beings. Hello, let's go around. Hey, how's everybody doing? A little zoom in. Hey, what's up? How are you? Welcome. Hey, welcome to the channel. Hey, welcome back. Another week, episode 46. Thank you all for tuning back in. Thank you for the responses we've been getting from the previous episodes. I appreciate you guys. We are tackling kind of a tough one, one that I've seen personally and experienced personally just in the course of my life of the ridiculous 36 years, which I'm still a baby, but still, there's been a lot of change. And as I dive more into the way that the human mind works, and this is more of a sociology kind of aspect, but it also deals with the psychology of each individual. But I've seen a lot of change with the suppression of masculinity. Masculinity being labeled as toxic, chivalry not being what it used to be, men going off the rails, diving deep into alcoholism and addiction and violence, and I have been that as well. So this is going to be very interesting. I'll be honest with y'all, the script on this one is not as in-depth as it normally is for me, but there are hard bullet points. There are researched studies on everything that I looked up, and then I'm going to kind of just go with the flow on this. This one's going to be a tough one because I feel like I could get a little too carried away with it, but also I feel like being biased, my viewpoint can be very skewed sometimes as well. So if you're one of our female listeners, please do not hear me go off on a rant about how men are supposed to dominate the world. That's not at all what I'm saying here. What I'm saying is that one of the biggest issues I see in men's mental health is the suppression of masculinity. And this is going to be a recurring theme on this channel. This is a very surface level view of it, but we're going to go in depth in some episodes later on. So bear with me. I would love to get your input. I would love to get your feedback, as always, and I would love to hear a perspective that I can't empathize with, which is the female perspective. So y'all hit me up in the comments. Tear it apart. Go ahead and call me toxic. I would love to start that conversation with you. Bring it on. Let's go. That was a pretty good example of toxic masculinity right there. Anyways, before we dive into this episode, I could really use y'all's help. We are still in the uptick category on YouTube, but if you could like the video, if you could subscribe to the channel, and if you could share this with somebody that you think needs to hear it, or any of the content for that matter, and then if you could also comment, what is your least favorite aspect about these talking head videos? That would be very helpful. Just go ahead and do all those things right there. So anyways, moving on, we're going to dive into section 1 of all of this, which is just talking about the masculinity crisis. What the heck is going on? Okay. And no, I don't want you to go on your little soapbox here and talk about how this is some masculinity manifesto. Okay. This is something that I actually thought through. I'm working really hard on not blowing up on this one and trying to stay in that safe zone, if you will, right? You can blame masculinity being suppressed on politics, feminism, society, and church for that matter, considering that we would look at it and say maybe it turned men into wimps. So I think that it's time to revive it before society goes completely soft, okay? So let's just lay this out bare. There is a masculinity crisis brewing. And it's not just some incel rant. It's backed by cold, hard data. In 2025, there were reports from Equimundo's State of American Men, and it painted a very grim picture where young men are drowning in economic anxiety, isolation, and toxic online echo chambers, feeling like society's left them behind. Boys are lagging in education. Mental health is absolutely tanking. And the transitions to adulthood, you can absolutely forget about that. Many are stuck in this perpetual state of boyhood. The American Psychological Association has a spotlight on the future of men, and it highlights how cultural pressures are warping masculinities, which is, if you look at how that trends, it leads to higher suicide rates and emotional shutdowns. All right. And then pop psychology calls this the boy crisis. And there's a book, what is it called? It's Of Boys and Men, and I think it's by Richard Reeves. But he argues that boys are falling behind girls in school and life because society has completely ignored male needs. But here's the raw truth in all of this. This did not happen in a vacuum. Okay, this is over the last few decades, masculinity has been demonized as toxic, which is turning traits like assertiveness and protection into pathologies. There's a 2025 study from Brown University that notes that young men face overlooked pressures, driving a mental health epidemic. And they use the word epidemic in this study. Okay, in sobriety terms, suppressed men turn to booze and drugs just to be able to numb out the emasculation. And I've seen it in my own life, guys who feel like failures because they can't provide without being called patriarchal dinosaurs. All right, and this is a very tough spot. You force these boys, these men, into a state of limbo. And it's become even more evil now because you could talk, I'm not going to go into too severely about the politics of anything. I'm not going to really pick at too much. But if you look at how early this is beginning to start, and then you wonder why boys grow up into young adult men in their early 20s, teenage years, and they're just so freaking confused. It's terrifying. All right. Society is basically like, be vulnerable and cry more, and then wonders why men are absolutely checking out. And the newsflash is that vulnerability without strength is just whining. If we don't address this, families begin to fracture. Absent dads mean that there are about 63% of youth suicides, 90% of homeless kids. And this is per the stats from Toxic Wars of Masculinity book. Like, this is a real issue. All right, you got to wake up, folks. Masculinity isn't the problem. The suppression of it all is, though. All right, the boys' crisis is real. Lagging education, mental health nosedive, suppressed masculinity, that's the killer. It's all about this suppression aspect of it all. When you take something as simple, I have experienced this multiple times, where just opening the door for a woman is somehow or another seen as wrong. Now, I don't experience that as much with Southern people. I'll say that, and that could be a different study for a different day. And I'm not going to get into how I genuinely believe when it comes to traditional morals and values that Southern people tend to stick to that more so than others, just because of the cultural norms that exist in the South. But I mean, I've even been confronted multiple times with saying yes ma'am or no ma'am. That's a respect thing for me. But when you do it to someone who's, you know, this woke mindset or whatnot, they end up seeing that as being offensive. Like, what are we doing? You know, like, what are we doing? It's a respect aspect. They still do it in the military. You know, like it's a standard of respect. So I'm just saying there are a lot of confusing aspects to this. And again, this is kind of a scatter shot on all of it, but we got to look at where this is beginning. Okay. Section 2 of this is the suppression through politics, feminism, and society. The woke war on men. Okay. Politics, feminism, society suppressing masculinity, feminism. That's feminism's win, and that's men's loss. Okay, so it's time to get to this mindset where we can fight back a little bit, or society will crumble. I promise you that. You know, we can hit the political, feminist, and societal angles because nothing suppresses masculinity like a triple threat of progressive politics. Okay, feminist agendas and societal norms run amok in all of this. In recent history, feminism's third wave of political correctness have painted traditional manhood as the root of all evil. Aggressive, dominant, oppressive. You could think toxic masculinity campaigns that lump healthy traits like competitiveness with abuse. All right, there's a 2025 Deseret News piece that calls it the war on boys, which is leading to a masculinity crisis where young men feel attacked for being men. Right? Psychological studies back this. The American Psychological Association's 2019 guidelines for men highlight how conforming to traditional masculinity can harm mental health. But critics constantly argue that it pathologizes normal male behavior. Okay? There's a 2025 meta-analysis in the International Journal of Psychology that found that men endorsing traditional roles face a stigma, leading to lower help seeking and higher isolation. And then politically, policies like gender quotas and equity initiatives sideline men, especially in education. Boys are now the minority in college, and this is according to, I think, a 2025 New York Times data. Feminism's push for equality has absolutely morphed into supremacy in most circles, with San Francisco's polls showing that young men constantly rejecting feminism, right? Society piles on with this manosphere backlash, as UN Women notes that in 2025, where online misogyny stems from, suppressed masculinity starts to thrive. And it just is one of those things where you have to realize, again, I'm not going to get into the politics of it, but if you look at how the previous office, the previous, campaigns and whatnot were, it's like this constant push for equality. I challenge you, without listening to me go on a rant about it, go look up the history of feminism, and you tell me if any of that has anything to do with the empowerment of women in a healthy way. It's more about the suppression of men than it is the empowerment of women. And this is a consistent theme that pops up over and over again, and I don't know why the hell we don't talk about it more. Never, ever, ever will I be someone who says that women are less than men. Are women built to be physically weaker or smaller in stature? Absolutely. There's a reason for that, because men are charged to be the protectors, the providers, right? Can men carry children? No, they cannot. That's one of the most beautiful gifts in the world, is that women have the ability to create life within themselves, to have life feed from them. To the mother's instinct, the ability to be a mother, is one of the things that I don't know how, somehow or another, we got so freaking twisted in society that we just disregard that or look at that as belittling. That is one of the most powerful aspects of a human that you could ever imagine having. Right? Men are charged to be, and if you go and look at this from a biblical perspective, right? Like, we were told, the fall of Adam and Eve, we were told that men, we are going to have to toil. We are going to have to constantly work and dig up the earth, and we're going to have to fight through all of the nonsense to be able to provide, and we're going to work all of our days under the sun. And that was an idea of being able to provide, right? And then women, your curse was the fact that you're going to be going through pain in childbirth. And look, I can tell you this as someone who is just a typical observer, someone who can pay attention and read and understand and learn biology and anatomy and physiology, that I would never, there's a reason that God does not allow men to give birth. Because have you ever seen a man when he gets a cold? We are wimps. We curl up in a corner and we cry about it. You know, like it's just, everyone leave me alone. I'm here to die. And it's like, you just have a runny nose. You're okay. Women are freaking warriors. You watch women who carry children, who give birth to children, who feed children from their own bodies for months and months and months. Like, it's wild to me. I would never have the fortitude to be able to do something like that. That's y'all's curse though. You get that. You get a monthly cycle that makes you miserable. You get a lot of changes in your body whenever you're having a child, and like, unbelievable, right? Men, our charge is that we are going to have to work and provide and to protect and whatnot. It's a natural instinct that somehow or another we've suppressed, and we've been told to suppress. I will tell you this, regardless of what the courts say, what law says, whatever, if someone breaks into my home and they have intention to harm my family, I will be the front line of defense every single time. I will lay down my life to make sure that theirs is protected. And somehow or another, that gets triggered as toxic masculinity. What kind of sick effing world do we live in where that is what men are learning now? And so you have these men that have these emotional problems. They have, just like anybody else, nobody's perfect. We struggle with mental health. We struggle with issues like that. And we're told to just toughen up and suppress it and deal with it. Look, I've got 3 generations of men that I've known in my family before me who all were, pick yourself up by your bootstraps, deal with it, suck it up, whatever. And we do have an episode coming up later down the line of how toxic masculinity can be. However, the reason that mentality, I believe, started to take hold is because somehow or another men started to misconstrue this idea that we can't be vulnerable. You know how much strength it takes to be weak? You know how much strength it takes to be able to be in touch with what's going on in your head? You don't have to be a sloppy, crying mess all the time, but to be able to be fully in touch instead of going to a bottle of alcohol, instead of disappearing and isolating and all that stuff, that's tough, right? The hard truth of all this is that the suppression benefits absolutely no one. Women end up with partners who can't lead or protect, families suffer from absent fathers, and then society gets softer, more divided. The war on boys led to masculinity crisis, echoing real pain. And in sobriety, suppressed men bottle up emotions until they absolutely explode in addiction or anger or whatever it is. You want to revive masculinity? Start calling out the BS on the narrative that all male traits are toxic. Some are an absolute lifeline. I'm aware of the fact that I'm an asshole. There are times where I am way too quick with my tongue. I say things I don't need to say. I'll bow up way too fast, and I do not need to do that. That to me is not what a healthy man is. But there are times where I will react out of emotion, and anger is the easiest one for me to deal with. If I'm hurt, if I'm sad, if I'm scared, whatever, I immediately will go to anger because that's the easiest one for me to deal with. I'll get in someone's face when what I could do, a healthier way, is to take a step back and say, okay, I'm about to draw a line for you here. You're not going to say that again about my family, but let's talk about this. Whatever it looks like for you, right? But I don't know. Politics say that, men need to be, more like women, and then complain about the soy boy epidemic. All right, grow a pair, society. We need real men, not apologies, okay? That's what I got. Woke politics, feminism, society, toxic masculinity, myth, suppressing men. Like the result of this is weak families and broken societies. And if you want to talk about the political aspect of this, that was the agenda. The agenda for everything, in my opinion, you can go look it up for yourself, was to break apart the family dynamic. If you convince a female that she is not worthy unless she gets the CEO position, So she spends her entire life getting educated and working her ass off. And then she gets to be 35, 45 years old. Let's say 45 years old. She becomes CEO of a company. She's making $500,000 a year, $1 million a year. She is accomplished. And then she gets to this point where she's like, okay, now I want to settle down. You're not going to be 45 years old having your first child. And that's the crisis that we're running into. And nobody wants to talk about it. Why? Because it's offensive. And if I say it as a guy, it's because I'm some toxic, misogynistic, masculine, whatever. That's bullshit. You've broken apart the family dynamic. That's exactly what they've wanted us to do this whole time. What government can come in and destroy a family dynamic if the father is healthy, if the mother is healthy, if those two are together on a team and they are raising young children, disciples, teaching them, learning, helping them? Why do you think there's such a resistance and opposition to homeschool? Why do you think there's such a resistance and opposition to people figuring things out on their own? Here, let me spoon feed you this narrative. It is the most toxic, disgusting, sickening, devil in disguise nonsense that I've seen. And like growing up, that was never an issue. Like I grew up in a broken home. My mom and dad divorced early. It was just this, whatever. It is what it is. But there was always an idea of a family dynamic. Dad is the head of the household, and mom, who is submissive to dad, is not below dad. She is right there on the same level. Mom and dad, boom, boom. And if you want to screw up, you're going to get the 1-2 punch. So somehow or another that broke apart. And then somehow or another, if you talk about it, you're wrong. You're awful, you're evil, whatever. You're trying to suppress women, whatever. It's bullshit. With all due respect, and I apologize for anyone under the age of 18 listening to this, grow the fuck up and get ready to start having a healthy family again. That's how you take back your life. That's how you live out God's purpose. Okay, moving on. Section 3 of this is the suppression through modern Christianity. This is the misinterpreted gospel, in my opinion. All right. So you think like Christianity suppressing masculinity, meekness twisted into weakness. All right. Biblical men were warriors. So that's what we need to get back to reviving. Okay. And we're shifting this to modern Christianity, by the way. Okay. The faith that is supposed to build strong men, but often gets blamed for turning them into doormats. And historically, since the 20th century, interpretations of turn the other cheek and meek shall inherit the earth, that has somehow or another suppressed masculine vigor, which is promoting emotional repression and passivity. For some reason, that's hard to say. There was a magazine called Medium or something like that, but it unpacks this toxic masculinity in the church where manhood is tied to stoicism, which is basically ignoring Jesus's own assertiveness. Flipping tables, anyone? Like, if you looked that one up, pay attention to that one. Psychology articles on masculinity and religion note that Christianity shapes well-being, but can reinforce suppression if it equates strength with sin. Okay, the toxic war on masculinity, which I think is Nancy Pearcey, who wrote that. She argues that modern Christianity reconciled sexes, but lost sight of biblical manhood as protective leadership. Jordan Peterson's lectures on, Jordan Peterson's lectures, they tie to Jungian archetypes. They tie Jungian archetypes to Christian masculinity, saying that suppression leads to chaos. And you could go look up Jordan Peterson talking about this, but he thinks that is one of the biggest issues with men today is this constant suppression, which has led to this utter chaos. You have men that are angry all the time. You have men that isolate all the time. You have men with rampant mental health issues and constantly increasing higher rates of suicide than women. It's a sick, and this was by design. People, by the way, wake the fuck up, please. Just wake up. Okay. And the raw truth of all this is that churches preaching that nice guys finish first create weak men who can't lead families, which leads to divorce spikes and fatherless homes. And this is a crisis of masculinity in Christianity. Okay. In recovery, this hits hard because men feel unmanly for struggling, suppressing emotions until addiction takes over. You got to revive it. We got to embrace biblical models like David, the warrior king, not just the shepherd boy. All right. Jesus was tough and tender. There's a balance behind all of this. It's better to be a warrior in a garden than a gardener in a war. It is my duty as a man It is my duty as a man to take care of myself, to prepare myself, to be prepared to protect my family at all costs. I will lay down my life if anything goes south. I'm also prepared. I've been vulnerable with you guys on previous episodes too. I'm in a very tough spot emotionally because I'm trying to power through school, and then I'm trying to figure out how to work from home. My wife is the breadwinner right now, and that's tough for me because I know that's not what she wants to be. It goes against her natural inclination to want to be at home with our child all day long. I get that role instead, and that's a tough spot for me emotionally and mentally because I want to be out there. I want to be out there working. I want to be able to provide. I'm loving every moment of where I'm at now, where I'm able to spend time with my child, but this is all investing into what I can do to provide later on. And it is tough. I'm telling you, it's tough. And then you live in, a world, especially out here in West Texas, where oil is king, where, you get looked down on because, what do you mean you're going to school and your wife's working? What a little wimp, whatever. It's that kind of thing. And it's tough. I'm not going to lie to you. It's very, very difficult. But there has to be this mentality shift. And the thing that has rooted me in all of this is constantly going back to God and being like, who did you create me to be? You didn't create me to be this wimp that rolls over and plays dead. I don't quit very easy. It takes a lot to get me to quit. And when I do quit, unfortunately, I go all in. I give up everything. I'll start drinking again. I'll isolate myself. And that's a tough spot, right? I have to be aware of that. And then I look at David, the warrior king. He was also a shepherd boy, but he's a warrior king as well. Jesus was tough and tender. Jesus did love everybody, and he came to serve, but he also flipped tables. He also whipped coin collectors. You got to be very careful with what your balance is. And I think that there has been this movement in modern Western church where it's like men have to be passive and they have to just suppress everything and they can't show any type of aggression. I think anger is outrageously powerful. I think it's a wonderful thing if used in the right way. If your anger is built on resentment and you're holding it all in, just waiting to blow up, that's not it. But I use anger. I get angry and it motivates me to read another chapter, to do this next thing. And that's how I use it. And by doing that, by accomplishing that, then all of a sudden the anger begins to subside because I've now accomplished it. I've fine-tuned it, right? I don't know where it came from, where we just have to now suppress everything. Men have testosterone. We have higher levels of testosterone than we do estrogen. And if you go and look how biochemically testosterone affects your central nervous system, how it affects your mood, how it affects your balance, we are triggered and wired to have aggression. Again, we're going back to being the protector. If someone broke through the house and I wasn't here, my wife, naturally, who is one of the most passive, laid-back human beings I've ever met, naturally something would kick in where she would try and defend our child, and she would put herself in harm's way to be able to do that, right? Women have that, but it's a lower level. Men have it it's right there on the front. You don't have to do much to piss off a guy. And that's probably where a lot of the toxic masculinity mindset came from. And if you go and look at the history of everything, back in the day, it was women were seen as property. If you got married to a man, you're seen as their property, and they can beat you behind closed doors and all that. And I get it. That needed to shift and that needed to change, and maybe that was the origins of the feminist movement. However, if you look at the history of feminism, it was originally to suppress the man. It was not to empower the woman. Okay, go look it up for yourself. Anyways, churches are constantly be meek like Jesus, forgetting that he whipped money changers. So that's not suppression. That's just a holy ass kicking, baby. Let's go. Church twisted meekness into male weakness. Ooh, come on now, get a little bit closer for me. Church twisted meekness into male weakness. That's got to be like some 1980s rap song at some point. Biblical masculinity, warriors for family. Bring it back. That's what I'm talking about. All right. So section 4 of this is reviving it. How do we get this back on track? Fellas, how do we grab the reins and say, all right, let's do this. All right. This is going to be the benefits for family and for society. Okay. So why would we even bother reviving masculinity? It's because healthy masculinity builds empires, starting with the family. Hear me say that again. Healthy masculinity builds empires, and it starts with the family. All right. Most of you are going to hear me say that, he's beating his chest and acting like men are the only ones who build empires. What I'm saying is that men have the ability, capability, the proven track record of being highly successful and in the healthiest way that starts with the family. I was listening to Tucker Carlson or somebody talking about it. He was saying that I don't trust a politician whose own house is not in order. And that's a big one for me. That's why I don't like politics. I don't give two shits about these people in office, because you look at these people and they're constant, their wives are just trophies. They're just a placeholder. They get to go do whatever they want to go do. Your house isn't in order. I would never do a channel like this if I genuinely believed that men could do whatever they want to do, because I think that's just unhealthy. You can't do that. That's hedonism. And we've tried that route. Go look at the Roman Empire. Didn't work out too well. However, this idea that men have the capability, we've been blessed with the abilities to be able to build things, to create things, to do things, but your own house has to be in order first, okay? So because healthy masculinity builds empires, starting with the family. Studies show that men embracing traditional roles like providing and protecting have better mental health, satisfying relationships, and lower mortality. There's a Center for Male Psychology piece that noted that the provider role is pro-social, which is constantly motivating men to thrive, okay? It's promoting this social behavior. If you are in this provider role, if you're able to, men, we got to tinker. Women, how many times do you go and talk to your man about something and he immediately tries to fix it? You feel like you weren't even listened to because all he's trying to do is fix it. We're wired that way. It's not justification, fellas. Be better. You need to learn to listen. But we are fixers. We're builders. We're creators. That's what we were designed to be. Okay. And when we get into that role in a healthy way, when we have a healthy mindset and when we're building for the right reasons, and when our wife is constantly promoting us, they're constantly pushing us to be better, it creates this pro-social behavior, which is something that is constantly pushing men to thrive, always. All right. And then for society, there's the Equimundo's 2025 report that urges that redefining masculinity to value caregiving reduces the isolation. Okay. You give men purpose. What we've done in society is we've taken purpose away from men. You can't be a protector. You can't be this toxic masculine human being. That's why I always love the people that have the arguments about men not being manly or anti-gun and all this kind of stuff. What do you do when shit goes down? You call a cop, and the statistics show that the majority of those cops are going to be male. They're going to show up with a gun. So let's think that one through for a second. I'm not going to get into that argument, but in families, strong dads mean resilient kids. Absent fathers correlate with crisis, okay? Or crises. There's psychological research shows that masculine traits like courage begin to foster social connectedness when it's balanced the right way. And in sobriety, revived masculinity gives men purpose, which leads to recovery, not hiding, okay? And this may be the hard pill to swallow in all of this, but if you suppress this more, you watch society begin to implode. You're going to take the men away, take them out of the picture. You're going to have higher crime, broken homes. If you begin to revive it, then men begin to step up. Their families thrive, and then the world starts to stabilize. It's just simple. It's that simple, honestly. All right, masculinity benefits are going to be better health, strong families. You suppress it, hello, societal collapse, all right? So the masculinity issue isn't a myth. It's a manufactured crisis from political agendas, feminist overreach, societal norms, and then misconstrued/twisted faith, which is robbing men of their fire and society of its backbone. All right, we've unpacked the suppression, the crisis, and the revival paths with tons of studies that are going to be, and you can go look all these studies up in the bottom of the episode description, but these prove that balanced masculinity builds healthy families and societies, okay? Don't buy the toxic label. Embrace the strength that you have in your heart. All right, so here's your homework. Men, insert one masculine trait this week. Protect, provide, lead, whatever it is, and then share it in the comments. Let me know how it went for you. Whether it went well or not, just let me know. Thank you all for rocking with Sober Psychology. Like, subscribe, and share this. And until next time, go ahead and reclaim your manhood. stay sober and build something unremarkable. All right, revive masculinity now for the families, for society, for your sanity, or just stay suppressed and watch everything burn. All right, keep your head up, keep your heart open, go help somebody. Love you guys.